Hey Bullets YouTube channel.
Hurry up, now tell us why you're here.
I forgot to mention this last video, but with Jackson Storm's 11th consecutive win, he broke Don Chapkar's 10 races won in a row record set in 1985. And now, Jackson Storm now holds the record of winning 11 Piston Cup races in a row. And also, these are his only 11 Piston Cup starts so far. How does any car win all 11 of their first ever Piston Cup races? How? Now onto this race, where Cal Weathers will not be running this race, which means that Team Dynaco needs another racer. And Tex Dynaco would ask all of these racers, including Jeff Gorvette, to race for Team Dynaco. And Team Dynaco even asks David Raycar to come out of retirement. And David Raycar would say this: I would want to race for Team Dynaco, but David Raycar is being realistic here. About coming out of retirement, Frank Vroomerson was asked this question. And then Frank replied that he is retired from Piston Cup racing. And Greg Beeple would also retire from Piston Cup racing following a few races where he couldn't qualify very well. Tex Dynaco, feeling that he's running out of options, gets Mike Splatloper to race for Dynaco. And Mike Splatloper will have this new look racing for Team Dynaco. And Ronald Clutcher is disappointed that Tex Dynaco did not choose him. How is Tex Dynaco coming to the conclusion that he should try to get one of these guys to race for him? And an anonymous Piston Cup fan said this about Dynaco's new racers. And Tony Gasworth is out this race because of a qualifying crash. Now into the starting grid, where Jackson Storm will obviously start at pole position with JP Drive to his outside. Row 2 has flipped over, and Ryan Inside Laney to his outside. Now on to Row 3, where the Garrison Motorsports teammates of Pitbull Speed Racer and Chris Roman will be starting. Another Garrison Motorsports racer, JD McPillar, will be starting alongside Jonas Carvers. Row 5 has Tim Treadless starting alongside HJ Hollis, both hoping to do well this race. Row 6 has Dan Garcia and Nick Shift, the only next generation racer not to lead a lap yet. Row 7 has Kevin Carvick and Aaron Clocker, two red cars hoping to do well this race. Row 8 has Harvey Rodcap and Ed Trunken, who had a horrible first qualifying lap for this race. Row 9 has Bubba Wheelhouse and Jim Reverick starting to his outside. And starting in Row 10 is Barry DePedal and Steve Slick LePage, who was very slick in qualifying. Row 11 has Cam Spinner and Richie Gunzit. I wonder what they'll do this race. And starting in Row 12 is Green Bean Carafine, hoping to do well this race, and Eric Breaker to his outside. Row 13 has Herb Kerbler and James Garrison, the fastest stock car in qualifying for this race. Row 14 has Jamarcus Cakart and Bobby Swift to his outside. Now on to Row 15, where Brick Yardley will be starting alongside Ralph Carlo. I wonder how they'll do this race. And Row 16 has Ponchi Wipeout having a good qualifying run, beating Lightning McQueen! What are you doing back here? And Row 17 has Maury Clutchburn, who has qualified for every single race this season. And there's Rev Rodages as well this row. Row 18 has Cal Williams starting ahead of Reb Meeker to his outside. Starting in Row 19 is Darren Leadfoot starting alongside Alex Bloman, hoping to prove Chevrolet Motorsports that he can qualify for a race. Row 20 has Brian Sparks and Sebastian Silva, both lucky to qualify for this race. Row 21 has Arthur Carstro and Ricky Axel to his outside. And starting in 43rd is Dynaco's new racer, Mike Splatloper. These 7 cars, among many others, failed to qualify for this race. Onto the race? No, not yet. Because Craig Shiftwright challenges the results of qualifying. And Dino Draftsky, who qualified 44th, demands the results of qualifying. Hearing the complaints from Pancake Shiftwright Racing, Piston Cup officials would review the results of qualifying. After their review, they found that Mike Splatloper had a qualifying time of 28.012 seconds, and Dino Draftsky had a qualifying time of 28.013 seconds. Unfortunately for Dino Dravsky, it still means that he failed to qualify for this race. But this also means that Dino Dravsky only failed to qualify by 1/10,000th of a second, setting a new record for the smallest margin of time that a racer failed to qualify for a race. This gives a huge sigh of relief for Team Dynaco, knowing that they will not be missing a Piston Cup race for the first time since 1962. Now into the race, where Jackson Storm would lead the first 9 laps of the race before JP Drive would take the lead from him, leading all the way until lap 15, where Jackson Storm would retake the lead. He would lead for 2 more laps before JP Drive would take the lead from him. He would lead for 5 more laps before losing the lead to, you guessed it, Jackson Storm on lap 22. But on that lap, Tim Treadless would push Jackson Storm out of the way, allowing for Flipped Over to take the lead. He would lead the field into lap 23 before losing the lead to Pitbull Speed Racer, who would lead all the way until lap 27, losing the lead to Nick Shift, who would lead his very first Piston Cup lap. But this would be short-lived as Jackson Storm would take the lead again. But on lap 30, JP Drive would take the lead for himself once again, leading for 6 more laps before Cam Spinner would take the lead. He would only lead for about 50 yards because Flipped Over would then take the lead. He wouldn't lead for long either because Alex Blowman would be out because of an engine failure on lap 36. After the restart, Jackson Storm would take the lead again, but then he would lose the lead to Chris Roman on lap 39, but he would not lead for long because Tim Treadless would push him, and then Tim Treadless would take the lead for himself on lap 39, leading the field into lap 40, but then would get pushed by J.D. McPillar, teammate of Chris Roman. And then J.D. McPillar would take the lead for himself and lead the field into lap 41 before losing it to Jackson Storm, who would lead the field into lap 42. Later that lap, JP Drive would take the lead, leading for 5 more laps before losing the lead to Flipped Over, who would then lead all the way until lap 53, where obviously he would lose the lead to Jackson Storm, but he would not lead for very long, because just under 200 yards later, Flipped Over would be back in the lead, leading for 2 more laps, and then Jackson Storm would retake the lead once again, leading until lap 69. Meanwhile, Ricky Axel would go down 1 lap on lap 62, and 2 laps later, Rev Rodages would also go down 1 lap, and soon after that, Brian Sparks would also go down 1 lap. Who was next? Mike Splatloper would try to avoid getting lapped, but then, oh no! He would slip! And then hit the wall hard. And he was 39th as of lap 66. And now he's out for the season because of a hard crash. And he would retire from Piston Cup racing. I feel bad for Mike Splatloper. He just joined his dream team, and now he's forced to retire early due to a hard crash in his first race for this new team. And one of his new pitties, Bart Pedalwork, is upset at Mike Splatloper for this happening. I know this is a picture fluke, and Ricky Axel is out, same with Brian Sparks as a result of this crash. Aaron Clocker would take the lead after the restart and lead into lap 69, where JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading for 2 more laps. But then, Jackson Storm would retake the lead and lead for 4 more laps. And on lap 75, J.D. McPillar would take the lead. He would lead the field into lap 76 before H.J. Hollis would take the lead shortly into the lap. And he would lead into lap 82, where Jackson Storm would retake the lead yet again, leading for 4 more laps before J.P. Drive would take the lead once again on lap 86. Later that lap, Flipped Over would take the lead and lead until lap 90, where pretty soon after the lap starts, Jackson Storm would take the lead again. But around 200 yards later, Flipped Over would be back in the lead. And somehow, Paunchy Wipeout would take the lead for about 2 yards. But then, Tim Treadless would be second as of that lap, when he wrecks Paunchy Wipeout, who is not out. Hooray! Can't you see the smile on his face? And Harvey Rodcap would take the lead after the restart, but then lose the lead to H.J. Hollis pretty soon after the restart. And he would lead until lap 93, where Lightning McQueen would take the lead for 3 laps. But then, oh no! Lightning McQueen over-revved his engine! And now, Jackson Storm would then take the lead on lap 96. And now, Lightning McQueen is out because he blew his engine. And then, Jackson Storm would say this: "Why, Jackson Storm?" And then flipped over, would take the lead on lap 102 and lead until lap 107, where H.J. Hollis would then take the lead, leading until lap 111, where Jackson Storm would take the lead again, and then lead for 7 more laps before Aaron Clocker would take the lead until lap 125, where Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading for 11 more laps before, you guessed it, JP Drive would take the lead from him. He would lead for 8 more laps before H.J. Hollis would take the lead from him, leading for just 2 laps before JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading until lap 149, where Herb Kerbler would take the lead off of pit cycles and then lose the lead to Nick Shift, who would lead the field into lap 150, but then lose the lead to Barry DePedal, who would lead the field until lap 155, where, with slick moves, Steve Slick LePage would take the lead. But he wouldn't lead for very long because Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading for 9 more laps before JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading for 2 more laps before some dirty moves by Tim Treadless would result in Tim Treadless taking the lead. But on lap 169, flipped over, would pass him on the outside. But on lap 174, Jackson Storm would be back in the lead, leading all the way until lap 195, where Nick Shift would take the lead once again, leading all the way until lap 196, where JP Drive would take the lead around halfway through the lap, and lead all the way until lap 204, where Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading for 4 more laps before JP Drive would take the lead again, leading for 5 more laps before Steve Slick LePage would take the lead yet again, leading until lap 220, where Aaron Clocker would retake the lead, leading for 7 more laps before H.J. Hollis would then retake the lead, and lead until lap 231, where, surprisingly, Ed Trunken would take the lead. How? He hadn't been a contender all day, and about 5 laps ago, he was 20th! But Tim Treadless would then take the lead on lap 233, leading for 3 more laps before Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading all the way until lap 258, where J.D. McPillar would take the lead once again, leading all the way until lap 260, where Jackson Storm takes the lead again. But 8 laps later, JP Drive would then take the lead until lap 272, and then Nick Shift would take the lead off of pit cycles. But then, when he went to pit, Eric Breaker would then take the lead, leading on lap 272. But then when he went to pit, Ryan Inside Laney would take the lead. Meanwhile, Ralph Carlo would be out because of engine failure on lap 272. Herb Kerbler somehow ended up in the lead after the restart, but then, very quickly, he would lose the lead to Kevin Harvick on lap 274. But then, Pitbull Speed Racer would retake the lead on lap 277. Soon after taking the lead, Jackson Storm would be back in the lead, leading all the way until lap 299. JP Drive would take the lead on lap 299 and lead for 22 laps before Jackson Storm would take the lead again, leading for 4 more laps. But then, Jonas Carvers would somehow take the lead off of pit cycles on lap 325. And then Ryan Inside Laney, for the second time today, would take the lead off of pit cycles. But then Bubba Wheelhouse would then take the lead on lap 325 as a result of pit cycles. Dan Garcia would then take the lead a few yards later, leading the field into lap 326. Chris Roman would take the lead soon after that, leading all the way until lap 328, where JP Drive would take the lead once again, leading for 4 more laps before, you guessed it, Jackson Storm would take the lead. He would only lead for 1.5 laps before Harvey Rodcap would take the lead. He would lead for 2 laps before Aaron Clocker would take the lead once again, leading for 2 more laps before losing the lead to H.J. Hollis, who would lead all the way until lap 345, and then Jackson Storm would take the lead on lap 345, but not for very long. But Arthur Castro would refuse to let Jackson Storm lap him, and then Tim Treadless would push Jackson Storm on lap 345, and Jackson Storm would not be out. But unfortunately, Arthur Castro is out. Why? Barry DePedal would take the lead after the restart and lead all the way until lap 381. And Bobby Swift would be out on lap 359 because of an engine failure. And Reb Meeker would go down a lap on lap 362. 3 laps later, Murray Clutchburn would also go down a lap. But on lap 381, JP Drive would take the lead. He would lead for 7 laps before Jackson Storm would take the lead again. And he would lead the final 12 laps of the race to win the 2016 Toe Cap 400, winning his 12th consecutive race in the Piston Cup. Flip Dover would finish second this race, followed by JP Drive in third, HJ Hollis in fourth, Ed Chunk in fifth, Cam Spinner sixth, Barry DePedal seventh, Kevin Carvick eighth, Chris Roman ninth, and JD McPillar rounding out the top 10. Sebastian Silva would be the last car to finish on the lead lap this race, finishing 33rd. I already went over the top 10, which are of course all next generation racers. Ed Trunk gets surprised with a top 5. But who misses out on getting a top 10 finish? Steve Slick LePage! Not very slick, are ya? But he did finish ahead of Tim Treadless, Pitbull Speed Racer, Nick Shift, and Harvey Rodcap, who finishes 15th, same as his number. Bubba Wheelhouse, Ryan Inside Laney, Jonas Carvers, Richie Gunzit, and Herb Kerbler round out the top 20, with Dan Garcia earning 100 points as he finished 21st. Aaron Clocker somehow finished second, just ahead of Green Bean Carfiend, Eric Breaker, and Jim Reverick. Once again, the top 25 are all next generation racers, with Brick Yardley being the best of the stock cars, finishing 26th, followed by James Gearson, Paunchy Wipeout, who ran a great race this race, Rev Rodages, Jamarcus K-Kart rounding out the top 30, Cal Williams, Darren Leadfoot, and Sebastian Silva all finish on the lead lap. Reb Meeker and Maury Clutchburn do finish the race on the track, but they all finish the race a lap down, and 36th and below were unable to finish the race, unfortunately. How is Lightning McQueen doing this badly? And now, onto the top 20 in points, where Lightning McQueen is still in first, followed by Tim Treadless, Flipped Over, Cal Weathers, and Bobby Swift, rounding out the top 5. Somehow, Cal Weathers is still in fourth, despite not racing for the last few races. Brick Yardley, Harvey Rodcap, Ed Trunk, and Aaron Clocker and JD McPillar round out the top 10, with Ryan Inside Laney in 11th. Followed by Dan Garcia and Reb Meeker, who is not doing very well these last few races. And James Gearson and Kevin Carvick are just behind him in 14th and 15th. Ricky Axel is in 16th, just ahead of Chris Roman, JP Drive, and Jonas Carvers. And rounding out the top 20 is Maury Clutchburn, 89 points ahead of Jackson Storm! He's coming for you, McQueen!
Remember to press the notifications button, which goes ring, ring, ring after you press it. And lightning strikes back, and that's as if you subscribed, of course. And thank you for watching this entire video.
How is Jackson Storm doing this well? There are other next generation racers to drive the competition now. And for the last few races, for that matter. Do you think that Jackson Storm might actually catch up in points to Lightning McQueen? Which would not be fair, as Jackson Storm did not run nearly half of the season. Now, the next race, the 29th race of the 2016 Piston Cup season, will be coming out soon enough. Hopefully around as soon as this video came out. Around 2 weeks. Hopefully I have enough time to post this video soon enough. Unfortunately, the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is still going on over 3 years later. The Ukrainian people just want to live in peace and have freedom. The tyranny has taken over around 1/5 of Ukraine's land, including Crimea, the Donbass, and parts of the Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv oblasts. and it's slowly becoming more, because every day it gets harder for Ukraine to win the war due to declining supplies. We here at the K-Bullets Piston Cup YouTube channel stand with Ukraine in their struggle against Vladimir Putin's tyranny and recognize Ukraine's true borders, as shown by this map. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, Nechai Shvetsya Daroratsya, Ukraini Permoha. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. May Ukraine be granted victory very soon.